Hi guys, thanks for stopping by my channel. We are on day 12 of Sparkmas, and with it being our last day of Sparkmas, I decided to do a tutorial on my most requested item on a tutorial, and that would be a book sleeve. Now, before all my non-sewing friends run off, please go check down my links below because I have linked a few small handmade businesses that make and sell book sleeves. And I love personally supporting them. This includes my friend April at Tis So Sweet. April does a ton of custom work, and if you're looking for a specific fabric or type of book sleeve, April is the one for you. Also, we have my friend Andy at Union in Maine, where she actually does crochet Kindle sleeves, and they're so cute. But last and very not least is the queen of book sleeves herself, is Rachel at Bessie Book Sleeves, where Rachel she's the queen of book sleeves. I mean, just go check out her stuff. And then also as well, I sell and make book sleeves on my Etsy shop, and everything is linked below. And I want to let you guys know that book sleeves can be also used for other things as well. Like my hardcover book sleeve actually can hold an 11-inch iPad, even with my case on it. My paperback book sleeves are great for journals, like junk journals and different things like that. And then last is the smallest little size, which I'll be showing you today, is how to make a Kindle sleeve. So without further ado, let's get started. For supplies, you are going to need a main fabric, a lining fabric, some type of foam. I'm using Soft and Stable. You can also use batting. You're going to need pins and clips, a ruler to cut your fabric, and a rotary blade or scissors if that's what you have. I prefer a rotary blade if you do have one, a cutting mat, and a template. I'm going to show you how I made my template for my Kindle, so if you have something custom you want to make, I'll show you how to do that. So here is my Kindle, and it's approximately 5 by 7. So I made sure that there's an inch seam allowance around the whole thing. Now, if you have a book you're trying to do and your book is thicker, you're going to want to do a larger seam allowance, but please do at least an inch around the entire thing, so 2 inches. Added on to the size of whatever you're using. And then if you want to do a pocket, I normally do over half of the length of the sleeve. And if you want to know what I use, here are the sizes that I use for my hardcover as large, paperback as medium, and the Kindle as small. I use paper as a template, so it's just easier to eyeball. I line my ruler up on top of my paper and I cut that way. I just think it's easier instead of trying to measure every single time. This way I can completely zone out. And if you need a list of supplies, I have it linked below. You're going to need 2 foam pieces, 2 lining pieces, 2 of your main fabric pieces, and then if you want, you don't need to do, but a pocket piece, preferably out of your main fabric. If you are using a pocket piece, you're going to want to make sure you find the top side that fits on your sleeve. So make sure the width is going to line up with your other pieces and find the top side. Then you are going to iron it 1/4 of an inch. You can also do 1/2 an inch. I just kind of eyeball it. Iron down 1/4 of an inch. And once you have it flattened, you are going to fold it again. This is going to create the top seam for your pocket. So you want to tuck those raw edges in, completely flatten it down, and once you have it ironed, we will take it to the sewing machine. And we are just going to do a top stitch along that fold we just made. So make sure to back stitch, and all you have to do is sew along that edge. Be sure to backstitch at the end as well, and then trim all of your loose threads. Now we are going to start building the main part of our sleeve. You're going to need both of your foam pieces and both of your main pieces. Line up your main pieces each on the foam with wrong sides touching the foam, and then make sure directionally, if your fabric has a direction, that they're lined up. Then I like to iron them down just to kind of secure them. Make sure there's not any wrinkles. If your foam does have any wrinkles or creases in it from shipping, this is also a great way to get those out. So if you spritz them with a little bit of water, I don't use steam in my iron, I just spray with distilled water. If you just iron with fabric on top of it, those creases will come out. And then this is completely optional, but I like to use the 505 temporary adhesive spray. I think this helps a lot, especially with beginners. And all you do is spray a little bit on the foam after you pull back the main piece and then lay that back. Now this is really going to keep your pieces in place while you're sewing and putting everything together, and it keeps it nice and flat, especially if you just ironed it, which I do recommend. So make sure it's all flattened out. You just want to do a little smidge of glue and just make sure it's flat. So I fold down half and then spray just a very light amount, flatten it, fold the other half and spray it. Make sure not to get this on your other stuff, but see, it's barely on there, just a little bit. But yeah, you don't want to get this on your work surface. It will get sticky. So just try to stay towards the center, but I love this. Now you are going to take your pocket piece if you're using one, and you're going to line it up on one of your pieces. Sometimes the fabric matches up, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on your pattern and how you cut your fabric. So I pick whichever side it matches up with better. I just kept going back and forth. This one fits either way. So once you have that, I like to iron the pocket on top of the main piece just to make sure there aren't any wrinkles. It's all flat. And then you're going to take your other piece without the pocket and put them right sides together. So each foam should be sticking on the outside. And then I put a clip where that top of the pocket is. So when I'm sewing, this clip is going to keep that pocket secure. Now I'm going to pin 3 sides of the book sleeve, leaving the top part of the book sleeve open. So you're going to do each side and the bottom. I use clips. You can use pins, but it's a little bit harder with the foam. I highly recommend these clips that I got off of Amazon, or you can get them at the craft store. And we are going to sew around the side, the bottom, and the other side, leaving the top open. If this is your first time using foam on your sewing machine, just go slow. It's really not that hard to work with. Just make sure your presser foot is down. I use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You make sure you backstitch at the beginning, and then all you do is sew. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because it's just straight lines. And then when you get about a 1/4 inch away from the bottom with your needle down, lift up your presser foot and pivot your fabric, put your presser foot down and continue to sew. This will give you a really nice sharp corner on the bottom of your book sleeve. So you're going to continue to sew along the bottom all the way, removing your clips as you go. Like I said, you don't need to speed through this. And then when you get about a 1/4 inch away from the side, you're going to stop with your needle down, pick your presser foot up, and then pivot your piece. See how easy it is? See, I needed one more stitch to get about a 1/4 inch away. So I did one more stitch and then pivot, keep on sewing the rest of the way. But once you get back to the top, make sure you backstitch, trim all of your threads, and then we are going to trim the corners of our book sleeve without hitting your stitches. This is going to give it a really good sharp pointed edge. Now for the lining, You are going to put it right sides together. Mine does not have a right side. Place them right side together. I like to press them, get any wrinkles out, trim up any of the loose strings and threads that might be coming undone. And this is where I use my pins. You are going to pin each side. So the long sides you are going to pin. You are going to leave the top unpinned, and you are going to pin the bottom, but you are going to want to sew at least a 4-inch gap. So you're going to sew the sides, leave a 4-inch gap at the bottom, and completely leave the top open. Once again, we are using a 1/4-inch seam allowance. We're back stitching at the beginning of our project. We are pulling pins as we go, and you're just going to want to sew a slow straight line. And then when you get about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom, you're going to create that point again with your needle down, lift your foot pedal up, pivot it, continue sewing for about an inch, back stitch, then leave a 4-inch gap on the bottom, start sewing, back stitch again, go to the corner with your needle down, pick up your presser foot, pivot, and continue sewing back up to the top. Once you are back up to the top, back stitch and trim up any of your threads. So you can see here where I stitched and left that gap on the bottom, and then I trimmed my corners as well. Now I'm going to turn it right sides out. My scissors have a dull rounded tip, so I use them to point my corners. If you have pointed scissors, I would suggest using a dowel instead, and you're going to point your corners. Then that opening at the bottom, we are going to fold in 1/4 of an inch and press that closed. That is going to be a seam that we're going to close later on. And just make sure you press your lining flat. This is going to make the next step way easier. So I iron one side, flip it over, iron the other side. Just make sure you get all the wrinkles out. Now you are going to take the foam side and you're going to put your lining inside the part you have sewed with the foam. Try not to put it inside the pocket, and just put it on the outside in between the pocket and then the back piece of our book sleeve. And you're going to want to line the top part of the lining up with the top part of the foam and your main fabric. I line up the seams on the edges. This really helps it. And then I know I'm not in frame, I apologize. And then I clip it. You can see here, I clip them in place before I sew. You really want to make sure there's no bubbles, no wrinkles, anything. And you're going to take off the extension part of your sewing machine so that you can fit the sleeve around it. And we are going to sew around that top opening. I like to open this top seam and start there. You're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the top and backstitch over that, and then 1/4 inch seam allowance around the entire top. Go really slow. You don't want to fold your fabric and it get bent. You can see I'm opening up that foam seam just so it's not so bulky for our machine to go over, especially if you have a basic machine like mine. And you're going to just keep sewing, removing pins as you go. You don't want to really pull or force it. And then once you get back to that main seam, make sure you're back stitching. Always back stitch at the beginning and end of all of your stitches. Trim your stitching. And then now we are going to pull the lining out, and through that hole we left, we are going to grab the bottom of the foam and turn our book sleeve right side out. This is why you want to leave at least a 4-inch gap at the bottom. If you're doing the larger book sleeves, I do recommend doing maybe 5 or 6 inches because the foam is pretty bulky. And don't force it. You don't want to rip any of your seams. And once again, once I get a majority of the foam part switched around, I then will use my hand as much as possible to point the corners, but as soon as I can't point it anymore, I use my scissors again, or you can use a dowel, and you just want to point your corners. If you don't point them all the way now, you will not be able to do it after this next step. So get it to the way you like. Make sure it's how you want it. And then you're going to want to fold that seam back in. I like pre-pressing it because I think it's easier. And you could go in and sew it right away. If you want though, you can also press it again before you sew, but you're just going to do a simple top stitch to close that opening. So we have that extra part back on our sewing machine if you want. I just think it's easier. And we are going to back stitch, sew across that whole opening, making sure each side matches. And then when we get to that end, we are going to back stitch and trim our threads. You are now going to put the lining back inside the foam pieces. I use my finger to point each end to each corner. And then you want to roll your seam all the way around. I also like to press my seam once I get it completely rolled. This is how you're going to finish off your top. Once I press around that seam, this really helps the foam lay down. I really think it helps to use clips again to hold it in place while I'm sewing, especially those edges. I really like to make sure I'm using a hot iron and pressing that down. And I'll use the clips on there just while I'm situating the other sides, and I take them off as I'm sewing, but I really think they help because this next step is very simple but can be really tricky if you go too quickly. I am going to now do a top stitch around the entire book sleeve. This is completely up to you on the way you want to do it. Do you want to have a 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 inch, an inch? It's all how you want to finish it off. You just need to do it because I think that's what really finishes off this piece. I normally do about a 1/2 inch top stitch on this on mine, but like I said, you can do a double top stitch. You can not do it at all, but I really think you should because I think that just really keeps the lining inside from rolling back up, and it looks really nice when you do it. So as you can see, I backstitched at the beginning and I'm just slowly going around. You want to make sure you're not rolling your fabric and getting it folded. Trim your ends, and now you're all done. I do like to press my book sleeve one more time. I think that just flattens it out. Congratulations, you just made a book sleeve. I hope you guys love this tutorial. I know it was a lot more in depth than my normal ones, but I hope it helped. Please let me know if you make one, and if you haven't yet, please comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks guys, see you next time.